This is the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I'm a big star, you know.
Listen live weekday mornings from 5 to 8 a.m. on 98.7 ESPN in New York, the ESPN app, the TuneIn app, or on your smart speaker.
Hey, Alexa, play ESPN New York 98.7.
This is DCR.
GK back to Taz. Here's the throw. And he is safe at home. And the Red Sox lead it 5-4. Incredible. When you wake up this morning, how do you bounce back from this?
Like they have all year. These guys have handled and dealt with adversity, bounced back, and I know we'll do it again.
I don't think Aaron Boone can say anything to get these guys on the right track. It's ugly. Doesn't feel good.
It's been a difficult season to this point, no question about it, but to these guys' credit, they continue to get off the mat time and time again, and we'll do it again.
This is DCR on 98.7 ESPN.
The guys have the morning off. DiPietro, Canty, Rothenberg. I wonder if they're sleeping in, or if right now they are just bug-eyed because getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you're doing that with us, Bob Wischusen and Willie Colon, sitting in for the guys after a night in sports and a day in sports like we had yesterday. There have to be some Yankee fans that want to vent. 800-919-3776, 800-919-ESPN. We'll get right to the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. And, Willie, we talked a lot about it at the top of the show, but I'm sure we've got some folks that weren't with us at 5 that are now with us at 6.
The early risers.
Absolutely. We can talk. We'll get into the micromanagement of that game, where we think Aaron Boone made mistakes. He had to answer for it in his post-game press conference. He second-guessed himself. But this team, heading toward the trade deadline, coming off of a loss like that, to me, I know Aaron Boone has talked about gut punches. If there was a team that had the best possible win that they could have in a season, followed by the worst possible loss, all within 24 hours, the Yankees on Saturday and Sunday somehow found a way to do it.
The emotional roller coaster the team went through, you're right. I mean, what's redundant is the gut punch, right? We've heard that come out of Aaron Boone's mouth a lot. When you talk about the win, the feel-good win that happened Saturday, for them to have a 4-0 lead after 7.5 innings, and then wow, it all dropped. I mean, it's gut-wrenching, man. And I don't know what Aaron Boone. I don't know how he should feel this morning. Like, if you're Aaron Boone waking up this morning after dealing with this weekend's series against the Red Sox, what are you saying to yourself, Bob? Like, what as a manager? I mean, put everything aside. You're a manager. You played the game. You know what? As a man, what are you saying to yourself in the mirror? Are you panicking? You know, what answers can you come up with? Because I think this is it. Yeah. I think there is no more answers. You just got to go through it. You got to ride with them, or you got to say goodbye. Either way, something has to happen. You talk about you can't be static. It's not a time to be static.
Yeah, and to me, that's on Brian Cashman, because the trade deadline is at the end of this week. So can this team... They have to decide they're either A or B. There is no C. A is, this is not working. This is not happening. And there's no guy on this team that they could trade that's going to bring back like the Aroldis Chapman kind of return, most likely, other than Aaron Judge. And they're not trading Aaron Judge. So it would probably be more minor moves, but a signal that, look, we're going to reload and we're going to focus on 2022. I don't know how they can do that. On the flip side, I could see only being 3.5 games out of a wild card spot, and if they continue to even tread water this week, they get Aaron Judge back, they go out and make a move at the deadline to bring in a difference maker, bring in one of those shortstops, Baez or Story, move Gleyber Torres back to second, LeMahieu plays first, have a different look to their team. I would also, to me, that's where they should go. Brian Cashman can't possibly look at this team and say, you know what, after 100-game sample size, as ill-conceived as it seems like this roster is, at some point we're going to flip a switch, and it's going to be okay, and this group's just going to prove me right and get it done. He, I think, and I'm sure he probably does, realizes this needs to be fixed. The question, I think, is Hal Steinbrenner going to, A, give him the resources to do it, and B, trust him to be the guy to do it? I think after 25 years never presiding over a losing season, he deserves that right. I think he deserves the right to say, all right, this team isn't working. I put together a team that's ill-conceived, but let me go out at the trade deadline and see if I can fix it. And I think it is fixable this year. I really do. But they have to do something at the deadline. They're going to go one way or the other. They cannot stay pat.
And that's what sucks about Sunday's loss. Whatever moves they make going forward, a win Sunday, you're like, all right, this team hasn't given up, right? They're still in the line of sight where you're like, all right, this team is fighting. They're figuring it out. They're working through some things. Don't give up on them. They had a scrappy win Saturday. If they would have won Sunday, it would have been a great win considering Herman's no-hitter. And then the way they lost Sundays was like, oh, every time we try to get ahead, it feels like we fall 5 steps back. And I think that's what the Yankees fans are right now. They're tired. I think they're out of answers. I think Boone's out of answers. I think right now something has to be done. And whatever they do, it has to be the right move going forward. Because right now I think the brand is at stake. And when the brand is at stake, especially in the New York market like this, then you start people losing hope. You can't be a Yankee fan losing hope.
Well, if the roster's out of answers, if the analytics department's out of answers, if the manager is out of answers, then it has to come from the GM. Right? The GM has to be the one to push the button to inject life back into this team. And we talked about it in hour number 1, and this is where we get to managing yesterday's game. Not bringing the infield in, sticking with Loaisiga one batter too long,
right,
and having the floodgates opened in that 8th inning. David Cone said it on yesterday in the 6th inning. Domingo Germán is throwing a no-hitter. The Yankees at the time had a 3-run lead. They were going to stretch that to a 4-run lead. And David Cone sensed it. Like, you could tell, he was sensing this is a moment. How horrible the loss was on Thursday. They seemed kind of dead in the water on Friday. They come back and win the way they did on Saturday. Rugi Odor goes the other way. They had the inspirational comeback. They look like they're absolutely flatlining, right, down by 4. They came back and won the inspirational game on Saturday. And now, you got a guy throwing a no-hitter into the 6th inning, into the 7th inning. You got a 4-run lead. It looked like the Red Sox at that point were non-competitive at bats, resigned to the fact that they were going to split with the Yankees, and that was going to be the weekend. And David Cone sensed it. You could tell. He said, look, this is kind of a turning point. Right? You could tell they're about to get Aaron Judge back. The cavalry charge is coming. The fan base is going to feel totally different about this team, and this team is going to feel totally different about themselves after they get this split, gain another game on the Red Sox, and Aaron Boone, to me, did not manage the 8th inning in the midst of all that the way you need to manage that inning, like Game 7 of the World Series. If David Cone can sense how important that game was, how this could be a turning point moment in the Yankee season from the broadcast booth, then the manager has to be able to sense that from the dugout, and I didn't feel like he sensed that from the dugout.
It's tough because I think if you're talking about David Cone and Boone, both former Yankees who had great careers with the Yankees, you would expect Boone to make a move somewhere down the line or do something in the 8th. They say, all right, he's still intact. When that doesn't happen, and you say, like you mentioned, David Cone sensed that if you're Cashman or the powers to be, you're like, man, is this guy over his head? Is he drowning? Right? Like, how does he not feel that sense of urgency? Who has that talk with him? Because I mean, it's easy for a manager or somebody in the front office to kind of talk to a guy in the locker room, but who's pulling Boone aside? Like, hey, man, you still with us? Like, where's your head right now? How do you not make that happen? Who's having that conversation with him? And that maybe that conversation needs to have. Like, who's putting the spark in Boone? Because a lot of what's happening after these games, these press conferences, I think a lot of people we've heard this before. Like, the narrative hasn't changed. It's kind of become redundant and stale. Who's pulling him aside? Like, hey, man, what's going on with you? We know what's going on the field, but what's going on with you? Let's talk about you.
Yeah, this can't be another gut punch that our guys are going to bounce back from. Sooner or later, the gut punches have to result in the bounce back or you being more demanding of the bounce back. That's the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. Got some open telephone lines at 800-919-3776, 800-919-ESPN. And you know what? Something else that I thought about while I was watching this game. When you have an 8th inning implosion like that, when you are up 4 and now the whole focus becomes not bringing the infield in, right, Loaisiga staying in one batter too long, pulling Germán out right after he gives up the double, which I'm not second-guessing. I didn't first guess that. I thought Germán was done. I thought they needed to go to their bullpen.
Well, they knew
I thought that was the right move.
They were just trying to lean on him a little bit more.
But if you watched that game, this game shouldn't just have been 4-0. This game should have been 9-0. To me, what gets lost in all of that, is the continued non-competitive at-bats from Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo Stanton had 3 different times in that game yesterday where he could have had a game-changing at-bat. And now, if Giancarlo Stanton just singles the other way hard, you're like, oh, wow, look at that. Like that almost jumps off the page. He is a non-competitive guesser at the plate right now, and that kind of a black hole in the middle of your lineup can't happen right now. It just can't happen.
Yeah. I think even if you go into, Gleyber Torres started the 4th off with a double to the left, and I was like, okay, we're moving, and that's when they took the 2-0 lead, and I was just like, all right, this team, maybe they're feeling it from Saturday's win. Maybe there's the lights on right now, but when you have Giancarlo not, to your point, not even being a factor, that just takes the life out of you, man. And they need something to jump off the bat or somebody kind of be that spark right where he's at right now because they need help, man. They need help.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
You're absolutely right.
Catch the show on demand wherever and whenever you want. Just subscribe to us, rate us, and review us wherever you get your podcasts.
The Mets, though, heading towards the trade deadline, I think are a really interesting team. Real quick, Willie, before we get back to the phones, to me, the Yankees, if they're making a trade, are making a trade out of desperation to try and inject life into a team that right now has to feel like dead man walking. The Mets, I think, got that old saying, a team has to earn the right to have its front office go out there and make a trade.
Yep.
You have to earn the right that the front office is going to say, all right, you guys are worth us going into our farm system and giving up some prospects and going out and making a difference-making trade for you. To me, if the Mets haven't earned that right, when will they? The Mets are a team. They should go get Chris Bryant. They should add a bullpen arm. They're a first-place team. But I still feel like they're a house of cards. I still feel like this current roster could be caught by the Phillies, could have a disappointing second half unless they go out and add as well. I think I would be just as disappointed if the Mets didn't make a trade as I would be if I were a Yankee fan if the Yankees didn't make a trade at the deadline, a difference-making trade.
And that's what the mindset that they're going to get past the division round. You need something or somebody to get you over the hump the next round. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Guests on DCR appear via the Goodyear hotline as well. Let's get back to the phones at 800-919-3776. Spike is down in St. Pete. He's a DCR regular. Joins us next year on 98.7 ESPN. What's up, Spike?
Hey, good morning, boys. Up pays and all. It's good man, Willie.
Up pays.
Okay, I know you take it. You know, Bob, Willie is in a tie for the greatest athlete in the history of Cardinal Hayes. You know who the other one was?
Tell me.
Jamal Mashburn.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Monster Mash.
Yeah, Monster Mash. Yeah, great school. A lot of money now for a great school. All right, anyway, listen, Bob, I don't agree with you on the Mets.
Okay.
If you listen to Michael, which I know you do, he said he's seen all the teams in the National League East. I'm sure you heard what I'm saying, but for the new audience, listen, it's coming in now. He says they're all terrible. Philly has no bullpen. Washington looks lost. And who am I missing? Atlanta. They lost Acuna. So the Mets, I agree with you there, too. But I don't see it. There's too much here. There's too much there.
Well, just a couple things. The Phillies have the easiest schedule in the National League in the second half. Of anyone. Okay. They have the easiest schedule, and they're only 4 games back, number one. Number two, if I'm a Met fan, I'm not just worried about winning baseball's version of the NFC East right now, where I can be 7-9 and make the playoffs. I mean, the Padres are a third-place team in their division. They just added the hits leader in the National League to their roster, and the Giants, and the Dodgers, and the Brewers, who are 16 games over 500. I mean, is it finally time for the Mets to not just view themselves as, hey, if we squeeze it out, make the playoffs, that was a successful year? Like, how about now we're in the playoffs, let's get a difference-making player to try and go win the damn thing? To me, that's what the focus should be at the trade deadline for the Mets.
Well, I think it also depends you need DeGrom to come back. You need DeGrom.
Oh, no doubt.
You need DeGrom to come back. And I think it's about consistency, too, Bob. I mean, it's easy to believe in this team. And I think partially what's happening with the Mets is they're a good team, but they're playing in a weak division. And so a lot of people aren't believers because are they victims or are they suspect because of the division they play in? But when DeGrom coming back, depending, as you just mentioned, they're going to get past the divisional round. What happens the next round? I think a lot of fans need to see. I think every Mets fan walks around with that black cloud over their head. It's easy for them to eat the popcorn and cheer and believe and get all geeked up for it. But part of them are like, man, it's going to happen, right? I just feel it. They're always waiting for the narrative to turn in a negative direction. So it's hard. I think it's hard until the Mets win consistently, until more things happen in a Mets favor. I think you're always going to have that kind of like, that kind of Ehore from Winnie the Pooh type effect, like, oh, here we go again, So it's going to take a minute.
Well, if the Mets go out and get Chris Bryant and they add him to their lineup, a natural third baseman, McNeil, can be moved around just about anywhere. But to me, you could put him at second. I don't know. To me, that would be a signal that the front office of this team recognizes that even though the Giants, Dodgers, and Padres look like stacked teams, even though it looks like the Mets right now are the best of a mediocre division, that they're taking seriously a chance that maybe they can make a real run at this thing and be a World Series team this year. And if they just stand pat at the deadline, to me that sends the message that we're happy winning the NFC East.
Are you a believer?
Yeah, I think, anytime, especially if the starting pitching behind DeGrom stays at the level it's been at so far this year. Yeah, now that Alonso's starting to hit home runs at home,
the polar bear.
If Conforto, the signs of life we have seen of late, look, Michael Conforto's way too good to be the player you saw, even with the injury through the first 60% of this season. Yes, if they went out and got Chris Bryant, I would think the Mets could go to the World Series. Absolutely. I think that you get one difference-making player to add to a team, and with a cavalry charge coming, hopefully, of Carrasco, maybe even Syndergaard at some point. Yeah, I think it would be hard to find a hole in this team that would prevent them, I think, from legitimately going eye to eye with whoever emerges from the West. Yes.
I think you talk about hole. I think Lindor. I'm waiting for him to show it for us.
Well, he's got to come back from this injury, and who knows how long it's going to be. But you're right. He also is too good, and again was starting to show signs of life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, before he got hurt. But yeah, I do think this is a team that, they're better defensively. Obviously, they got Lindor. They're far better defensively. If the bats that we have seen first half of the season go to sleep, start to wake up, and they add, a really motivated player like a Chris Bryant, I would think, that would love to all of a sudden come from Chicago to New York, big market to big market, and be thrust into a pennant race. Yeah, and you've got the best, not only the best pitcher in baseball, I think you arguably have the best athlete almost in the world. Like, who anywhere in the world is as good at his job as Jacob deGrom is?
Nobody.
Nobody.
The
difference between Jacob deGrom and the next best guy doing what he does might be a wider gap than the difference between any athlete in the world and the next best guy at what that athlete does. That, to me, is how good he is. It would be such a shame at the end of the year.
What I think is
to look back and be like, I cannot believe we had that performance from Jacob deGrom, another year like that, another Cy Young performance, and we didn't capitalize on it.
I think one thing I like about deGrom, especially being a Met, you get excited as a fan, whether you support the team or not. You're excited when he's on the mound because you know he's going to give you a stellar performance. You're about to see greatness every time he's up there. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the Mets, man. And it's about time, man. Something has to work for the Mets. And hopefully this is the year.
That's Willie Colon. I'm Bob Wischusen in it for DCR, 98.7 ESPN, 1-800-919-3776, 800-919-ESPN's the telephone number. Vinny in Greenwood has been patient. Joins us next year on 98.7 ESPN. Hey, Vinny.
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen? Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm calling actually today to talk about football, because baseball this year has been a little bit too much with these Yankees. But I'm actually excited about these Jets. And, it's the first time I could say that in a while. I really love what Joe Douglas is doing. Right now I think he's got the team going in a direction. Ever since Gates hire, it looks like his press conference, he looked like a guy you stay away from at all costs. He was just one of the first times in my Jet fan career was these past couple of years. Absolutely nothing to watch on the field. The product was awful. And I'm hoping now that they have something that at least Shallow will point them in the right direction. And I'm seeing Chandler Jones is out there. You know, you need a pass rush, and I don't think Lawson is for the pass rush.
I agree. I think if there's an assurance to be a move to be made just for insurance, because you don't know what type of C.J. Mosley is going to show up for you this season. If you get a Chandler Jones, who I played against, who is a monster. I mean, he's been racking up sacks since he put his feet in cleats when he hit the NFL. The guy's a ball player and a vet. And so if you get a chance to get a Chandler Jones to kind of match that defensive line and to help out that back end of that defense, man, I'm all for Chandler Jones. I've always respected him, even when he was a Patriots and landed in Arizona. But I've always been a fan of his game, man. I like him a lot. So,
well, they went out and spent a decent amount of money to, address pass rush as best they could with Carl Lawson. They also brought in Vinny Curry. I mean, they've got a really good defensive line. Well, I would say if there's one part of this team that I would say jumps off the page at having depth, having a rotation, I think, that will be difference-making. I think their defensive line is probably the best part, but backed up, I think, by the fact that C.J. Mosley makes them really strong up the middle. Mm-hmm. You talked about it in hour number one. The one position specifically that they did nothing to address, and you can't do everything in 1 year when you're rebuilding a roster. I get it, but they didn't add anything really at corner. They waited later in the draft to address corner. Bless Austin and Bryce Hall are probably the de facto starters, but if I were going to go out and make a move, if I were going to spend some resources, to me that would be the position that would jump off the page at me, is adding someone perimeter-wise on the secondary.
And they did nothing with Marcus May.
And I'm not sure that that's the wrong thing.
Really?
I don't know. He plays safety. Like, to me, that's what I keep coming back to. And I get, you're right.
Why do you say that, though? Stay there for a second. Why do you say because he plays safety?
Because in a salary cap sport where they are so devoid of talent, or were in so many places, giving a safety a big contract, to me, is just in a vacuum, is not the best allocation of your resources. Now, I get Marcus May. He has been a voice of the locker room, a leader, a yeoman. I mean, like, you should reward a guy like that. He has been everything from a team chemistry standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, that Jamal Adams wasn't, and you should try to reward a guy like that if you can, and it sends a message to the locker room that you're rewarding just a good guy. But there still has to be a way that you financially, responsibly value a safety.
Yeah, and I think from my last understanding is that they went to the table and they were just far apart. I think him and his agent's number compared to what the Jets want to do, I think there's a big gap. So I like May, man. I think you need guys in that locker room, to your point, who are good guys, who are culture setters, but also hold other guys accountable. He's that guy. He gets it. I'm a little worried about he's been dinged from time to time. That makes me a little nervous, especially if you're going to give a guy that much money. But I think you lose a piece like him. Now you're dependent on younger guys to fit a mature role, especially when you look at that defense as a whole. If it's not May, then who? Is it a guy like Quentin Williams? Because he's going to be down. He's still dealing with a foot.
Yep.
Who is it going to be? C.J. Mosley? You don't know about him. He's the question mark guy. So who's the next veteran piece on that defense? Who's been through it? Who's mature? Who has been kind of through the fire a little bit to kind of lead this team into the field? Because there's going to be some tough games, man. There's going to be some tough games, and there's going to be you need somebody in that defense to say, "Hey, we're all right. Let's just keep battling." Who's going to be that guy? I don't know necessarily the Jets have that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Even if Quentin Williams and C.J. Mosley are out there both on day one, the guys on this team that have kind of gone to war and have had a leader, they'll probably still look to Marcus May. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been the constant guy. The last couple of years, hasn't missed games. Look, he's everything that you want to pay. It's just you got to make sure that you're not allocating too much money to a safety. That's just, to me, and I'm sure that's the conversation, the yin and the yang that they're having in Florham Park around the conference table. How much money? Because that was what they went through with Jamal Adams. Adams, even if we think someday he might be in the Hall of Fame, guy's a safety.
We also got to think about this too, Bob. In the 13 of their 17 games, the Jets will face a team that has had a receiver go over 1,000 yards for a single season in the past 2 years. So they got this secondary has their work ahead of.
Yes,
and you need a guy like May. You need somebody in that secondary to really kind of be the nail man. Because I know from not only playing the game, when you start having guys fly around back there and the communication's not there and people start kind of falling away and hamstrings and all, you need somebody to say, hey, we're all right. Let's just do this. Let's focus. Let's start tapping the guys on the butt up front. Get after this quarterback. Help us out. So you need somebody. I don't know who that guy is. And that's going to be one of the big questions the Jets are going to have to answer going into this training camp.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I don't wake up at 4 a.m. to wear a swim shirt.
Looking for more access to the show? Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at DCR on ESPN.
It's Bob Wischusen. And Willie Colon sitting in for the guys after a Yankee meltdown that I'm sure some folks want to talk about at 800-919-3776, 800-919-ESPN. That's been something we've been talking about a ton so far this morning. We've had some Yankee fans vent. You want to vent about Aaron Boone and his managerial mistakes. You want to talk about what you think Brian Cashman should or shouldn't do at the trade deadline. David Cohn certainly sensed it in the sixth inning of yesterday's game. This was a turning point moment in the Yankee season. It needed to be managed like Game 7 of the World Series. The Yankee manager didn't do that. We'll talk about that coming up. We also touched on the Mets. Haven't talked about the Giants yet. Training camp opening this week. We did do some Jets, so football is back. But Willie Colon, a big football topic right now as we start the season in the NFL with COVID numbers on the rise, with right now the league far from 100% vaccinated. I'm sure they're never going to get there, but even half the teams not getting to the point where, they're in that like 80 to 85% range. And the NFL, and apparently with support of the Players Association, they can't tell players you must get vaccinated or you're not playing.
Can't do it.
I don't think the Players Association is ever going to go there. But what the Players Association obviously has done is they have gone along with the NFL in allowing these penalties to be imposed where if you have a COVID outbreak on your team, because players aren't vaccinated and you have to miss a game, we're not rescheduling. Not only are we not rescheduling, but if you're the team that's responsible for the COVID outbreak, you're the one that now is the team that can't play. Not only will the game be a forfeit for you, if we can't reschedule it, it's a loss. Your team won't get paid, meaning the vaccinated players won't get paid. And, oh, by the way, if you want to know why Matthew Judon, Patriots linebacker, tweeted the NFLPA effing sucks when he saw this, announcement made, when this memo was sent around by Roger Goodell, the opponents won't get paid. So you could be a team that's 100% vaccinated. You have done everything you're supposed to do, followed every protocol. You're ready to go play. You fly to a city. You're in your hotel, and you find out the testing has turned up a COVID outbreak on your opponent. You don't get paid. Your reaction to that when you saw this as a former player, if you were in the position of these guys?
It's inevitable, right? Somebody's gonna get popped, Bob. That's the problem. Like, we can't sit here and think that, everybody. To your point, if everybody gets vaccinated and the other team, let's just say the Giants, whoever, and there's an outbreak there, and now you're saying my money's at risk. This puts pressure on guys to start making calls to other guys' locker rooms to be like, hey, I don't know what you got to do, but you got to make this right because I need to eat. And when you start playing with guys' money and you start playing with guys, just financial stability, it gets real dangerous, man. And it's tough. It's tough for me, Bob, because I'm a guy. I'm not a fan of the needle. You know what I mean? I'm not a vax guy. I don't believe in vaccines. But me being a father of two, needed to feel like I needed some type of defense. I needed something. I'm walking around the city. I'm moving around. I'm shaking hands with different people. This thing is in the air. It's an airborne virus. Like I needed to feel I had some type of line of defense going into my home with my children. I don't know. I feel bad for these guys because they're putting them in such a tough spot because they're trying to say, well, we can't force you to do it, but if you don't do it and this happens, well, this is the outcome. So it's pretty much you're done regardless. But I also stand on the side of this. I know so many guys. I know, Bob, you've heard of it. You've been around the game a long time. Toradol shots, right? Toradol shots was something that was, I don't know, the NFL's kind of they kind of pushed away from it. They're not giving it to their guys. But I was a guy who needed a Toradol shot to play on Sunday because I had all my injuries and things I went through. I didn't know it was in a Toradol shot. I just knew it could get me on the field on Sunday. It allowed me to do the job I'm being paid to do so I could feed my family. That's it. That's all I was doing. And so now I'm hearing some of the rhetoric from these guys like, well, we don't know it's in a shot. We don't know the long-term fans. Well, I'm pretty sure you've done a lot in your career that you didn't know about, but you did it because you had to play the game. And this is your dream. This is your passion. And so I'm on the fence with this because I think there are some things that are sacred, as far as a man's body. You shouldn't force anything into somebody that they're not comfortable with. But I think a lot of guys have to kind of push back and say, hey, I've done some things in my career that I didn't quite know about, but I did it anyway. And I think they may have to lean on that. And we'll see what happens, man.
Well, I saw a great political cartoon the other day that to me kind of summed up everything we're going through right now. There's like a little kid looking up at the mom. And the little kid says to the mom, "What's that scar on your arm?" And the mom said, "Oh, that's my smallpox vaccine scar when I was given the smallpox vaccine." And the little kid says, "Why don't I have that?" And the mom says, "Because it worked."
Yeah.
That's why you don't have it.
Right.
Because, and all of these guys that are saying, I don't want the vaccine, I don't, and I think, again, it speaks to the politicization of this issue. This is not politics. This is medicine. They all got a mumps vaccine. They all got a measles vaccine. They all got a smallpox vaccine. They all got a polio vaccine.
They all did something.
That's why those things aren't with us anymore.
Yeah.
Because when you go to the doctor and the doctor says you have to have this vaccine, we just, yes, all right. Like if you're an NFL player and you break your leg, or, you tear your ACL, or you end up with whatever disease, you get cancer. You go to the doctor, the doctor says, this is what we have to do. No questions asked. All right, the doctor says, this is what I have to do to get fixed. That same doctor is telling all of these guys, get vaccinated.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do. This is safe. This is effective. This is getting us out of this problem. So the fact that we even have to have this fight, to me, is amazing, but the reason I'm curious about your take on it from a football standpoint and from a teammate to teammate standpoint is it seems like the Players Association is trying to play both sides of the fence here, right? Like they are not going to go anywhere near, hey, everybody that's part of our union, you must get vaccinated, and it has to be 100% vaccination rate or we're not letting you on the field. We're going to mandate it. Like they don't want to go there, but they are at the same time going along with the league and allowing such severe penalties. If there is a COVID outbreak, there's going to be a forfeit. You're not going to get paid. That it's almost like a pseudo mandate.
Yeah,
right? Like we're not going to mandate it, but we're going to allow the league to impose such significant penalties that it's almost like it is mandated. Because who in a million years is going to want to be the guy guilty or the guys guilty of two teams not getting paid and your own team having to forfeit again?
But Bob, what's the And I had to think about this myself. If the NFLPA was to step up and be like, "Hey, we're not moving forward. This is nonsense." Are you talking about strike? Are we talking about like what stance do you want these guys, the PA, to take? Because we already missed a season of football, right? It was a patchwork job. I mean, COVID really rocked sports in the world in general. Now you're talking about where we're starting to we think we're out of the clear with this thing. We're starting to move ahead. We're allowing people back in the building. People are getting vaccinated. People are trying to take positive steps so we can get through this thing. If we don't budge, like if NFLPA says, "Hey, you know what? NFL, that's not what we're doing. We don't like that. You guys, you really trying to stick us." Are we talking? Are we talking strike? Are we talking about not showing up to training camp because of this? Like, so that's why for all these guys pushing back, I'm like, what do you want the NFLPA to do? Like, what type of what answers do you want us to have, or the guys? Because I think the only answer is to play defense. Because I think they don't know where. I mean, if they do coincide with the NFL, which they are kind of, pretty much was what they're doing. And if they don't, it just puts so many people in awkward positions that right now I don't blame the NFLPA, but at the same time I don't know what the answer. I don't know what type of fort or defense they can put up to stop the NFL from doing what they need to do.
Well, their defense is that the vast majority of players seem to be on the side of this being okay, right? Like the league has already said that more than half of the teams, I think, are 80% vaccinated or better. That overall in the league, 75% of the players have been vaccinated. Now, what percentage of those guys are guys that are like, look, if I get vaccinated or if I don't get vaccinated, I might get cut? Well, you got 53 guys on a team.
Yeah.
There are only so many DeAndre Hopkinses. There are only so many Julio Jones, Tom Brady's, Matthew Stafford's, whatever. Right? There's only so many guys.
If you're a bubble guy,
this isn't your
fight.
Right. Like if you're in a roster battle and a coach is saying, all right, I got a guy, maybe even not in a roster battle, but like you're my fifth wide receiver. And you're very clearly a notch above a guy or two that, may or may not make the team as a sixth wide receiver, but you're refusing to be vaccinated, like you're not important enough to my team to risk that.
Yeah.
Right? So there's probably only about 20% of the roster that's even important enough where they could probably try and push this button and say, no, I'm refusing to get vaccinated. And a coach is sitting there going, all right, I'm just going to roll the dice with this guy because we need him so badly. So maybe there's a decent number of players that realize where they are on the food chain. And they're sitting there going, man, I'm just trying to make this team as a special teams guy. I'm not going to give them any reason to even think about cutting me. I'm getting vaccinated. But I have to think if 80% of the players in the league are vaccinated, that the vast majority of those 80% did it because they realize it's the right thing to do. It's the way out. It's the way out of this. It's the way for us to get back to normal, for me to be able to do my job, for the fans to be back in the building, for us to take our masks off at the complex, and so on and so forth. So I think that the vast majority of players probably are on the NFLPA side of we should be vaccinated.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. There's nothing worse walking into the building feeling like, all right, I got to check in the weight room. I got to get weighed in. I got to get breakfast. Oh, I got to go do my COVID test. Over and over and over. That's when you talk about guys' routine walking into the building, like he knows what he needs to do to get ready for the day, whether it's treatment, weight room, film study. Adding a COVID test on top of that, and especially if you get knocked and you're positive, that's a lot, man. So I'm with you, Bob. And then Bob, what we don't talk about is the wives club. There's a lot of these guys' wives who know, I don't know why it happens, because guys pillow talk. But there's going to be a lot of wives that be like, hey, are you such and such is on your team, right? Yeah. He's not vaccinated. Are you around him? Are you wearing your mask around him? Because you can't bring that if he gets COVID, if he tests positive, right. You can't bring this into the house. We got kids, and so it adds a sense of hysteria where guys are going to start looking at each other like, "Hey, man, you're my teammate and all." And football's a contact sport. We rub, we grunt, we do it all together. There's no way around it. So now you're gonna have guys holding other guys accountable. Hey, where's your mask? Stay away from me. Do this, that. So it just adds a lot, man. And I think, at this point, we're here pretty much. There's teams reporting to training camp. Just get vaccinated. Let's just push past this, man.
What would you say if you found out there were a handful of guys on your team? I mean, you were known as a team leader. You were somebody that I know, guys. You were a voice in the locker room. Right. So I would have to think you'd be a voice in the locker room on this. You get those 5 guys together in a room, and you say what to them about, what would be the way maybe you try to tilt the argument towards them realizing that the right thing to do, not only for themselves but for the team, is to get vaccinated?
It's tough, man, because I'm kind of dealing with this situation right now, Bob. I have obviously, I'm fortunate enough, I have a nanny, man, and I just assumed the nanny was vaccinated until it came up in the conversation in my house. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, when we hired you, I assumed you were vaccinated. Are you not vaccinated? And she said no. She was like, no, I'm not vaccinated, but I did have COVID. I came out of it okay, but I'm choosing not to get the vaccination. And so I'm saying, I was like, that can't be. Like, you have to be vaccinated for you to be able to work for me. And so I asked her, and I kind of just, in a calm tone, I was like, hey, man, what is your need? If you already had it, won't you still get it? So you just move past it and you kind of clear certain circles. Because I know when you apply for other jobs and you step in other places, people are going to ask if you're vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, it alters your place of your chance to get hired or whatsoever. And it was just simply a choice. She's like, I just choose not to get it. I don't know what's in it. I've talked to doctors about this and about that, and that's the problem, Bob. A lot of these guys have independently talked to different doctors and different sources about the vaccine, and they're hearing mixed stories. And so they're not necessarily, they understand why they should get it, but they don't believe they're not believing it in the stories or the education they're receiving. You know what I mean? So I think sitting these 5 guys are sitting there like, hey man, just get vaccinated. It's better for you. It's better for the team. It's better for the big picture. We're all here trying to win a championship. A lot of guys just don't believe in the information they're getting about the vaccination. No matter how many times you get told, they're being told that it's best for them in the overall situation, they just don't believe in the education of it. And so that it comes down to an individual stance overall. I mean, guys have to buy in. If mentally and spiritually or whatever, they're not believing in the bigger picture, man, then it's nothing I think you can do. Because once a guy's mind's made up, even if money doesn't, the threat of his money doesn't put him in a situation where he should do the right thing, I don't think you can move a guy. And I think you just kind of have to figure out how to move forward and then understand that, if he gets knocked or things go left, everybody kind of suffers from it.
Yeah, and that's a national problem. Right. Like to me, that's the NFL is just a microcosm of what the larger problem is all around the country, because only half of America is vaccinated. You're right. The same doctor that would tell them, this is what you have to do if you tear your ACL, this is what you have to do if you break your leg. By the way, when you were a kid, you were vaccinated like 5 or 6 different ways. Here you are as an NFL player. Not only are you okay, but by the way, you don't have the measles. You didn't catch polio when you were 10 years old. We're telling you this is what you need to do. That message needs to get through, and hopefully there are guys like you, leaders in locker rooms, that are going to continue to get that message through. 100% just about of the rest of the league is vaccinated. Like, the players are the only segment that isn't, because I know I work for the Jets. The message was sent loud and clear. And look, I ran to get the vaccine. My wife vaccinated me. I mean, she's an RN, and she enjoyed it. Like, that needle came from a distance. You know what I mean? Like, she stabbed me, and she enjoyed delivering that blow. But I mean, I got vaccinated as fast as I possibly could. But I mean, the Jets, they told all of the non-player employees, the people that don't have a union backing them, you will either get vaccinated or you will not be allowed in the building. You cannot do your job. You cannot, and that's every team in the league. That's every sport.
A lot of
all
people
employees that don't have a players' association behind them have been told you have to be vaccinated or you can't work here.
For me, it was a no-brainer, Bob. I got 2 young ones. I got a 1-year-old and a newborn. And I can fathom, physically or mentally fathom me coming in the house and they contracted something because of me. And so it was, like I said, I was an anti-needle guy. And once I had 2 little ones, my mind's changed. It wasn't even a thought process. I was like, I do something. Even they could have stuck me with Lysol. It didn't matter. I just needed something, just so I can know I feel like I did my part. And hopefully, a lot of guys feel the same way. Hopefully, they can do something. They feel like they did their part and they're trying to add to the better good. But it's tough. It's tough because I do have some sympathy and some empathy for the person that says, "Hey, man, I just don't want to do it." But at the same time, like you said, Bob, you've been doing a lot of things you didn't know about a long time. You're just choosing to be stubborn on this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, like when I get on an airplane and they close the door, I buckle my seatbelt and close my eyes because I trust that the pilot up at the front of the plane knows a hell of a lot more about how to fly a plane and get me from point A to point B than I do. So I am going to trust that guy to fly the plane. If I go to the doctor and the doctor says, this is what we need to do to get out of this, you should be vaccinated, I'm going to trust the doctor because the doctor knows a heck of a lot more about this than I do.
Well, we live in an age where people don't trust doctors, right? And we live in an age where...
But these guys trust doctors for everything else.
Yeah, but you're right. But what's stopping a lot of guys from going forward is this pure stubbornness. Yeah, that's what it is. It's just pure guys saying, hey, this is where I want to put my foot down. And it's just sad that they choose it now because... I'm excited about football. We just started the show talking about how excited we were just to get around football, to smell the cut of the grass, to hear guys running through tires. And this looks like it could be one of the things that can really put a fork in the middle of a season. And so it's going to happen. I mean, it is. I mean, teams are going to pop up with COVID outbreaks, and it's going to be. It just seems like an unnecessary headache. It just does.
Along those lines, the annual green-white practice is back at MetLife Stadium on Saturday, August 7th. Join the team under the lights. It's a full night of football, family, and fun. Download your free mobile tickets today at nyjets.com/camp and be listening this Friday to the Michael Kay Show for your chance to score a pair of New York Jets season tickets. The green and white scrimmage is supported by Atlantic Health System, Dell Technologies, JetBlue, MetLife, and SAP. It's Bob Wischusen and Willie Colon, 800-919-3776, 800-919-ESPN. We'll do even more football, hour number 3. Back to the baseball as well. We'll talk about the Yankees and where they go from here. Or you can give us a call on where the NFL is. You know, to me, that was a bombshell. When you find out that the league, it must be with the support, even the tacit support of the players' union, if you have a COVID outbreak on your team this year, not only is the game a forfeit,
the opponent.
If you're the team that's responsible for the COVID outbreak, you forfeit the game, but all of your players, vaccinated or not, don't get paid, and the opponent, they might get a win, but they don't get paid. Now you take away a game check from a player. If there was ever going to be peer pressure on guys to make sure that the minority gets vaccinated because the majority already is, threaten those guys money, and that is certainly the way that it's going to happen.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I have nothing left.
Hear more of DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg live weekday mornings from 5 to 8 a.m. on 98.7 ESPN in New York, the ESPN app, the TuneIn app, or on your smart speaker.
Hey Alexa, play ESPN New York 98.7.